Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode in Hult International Business School's webinar series. My name is Daren Loughrey, and I am the Associate Director of our MBA program on our Boston campus. Today's webinar is all about tackling the GMAT, and we will be sharing both test prep tips and also MBA admissions tips. Joining us this evening is Sergey Kouk, who is an expert GMAT trainer from Admit Master. Sergey left his career as a rocket scientist to take on a new challenge, helping aspiring MBAs tackle the GMAT. Sergey scored a 750 on his first attempt and has since developed a pedagogy to help candidates all around the world think outside the box, ace the test, and gain MBA admissions. Today, Sergey will be covering time management, retention techniques, and other secrets to a 700+ GMAT. And I, from the admissions perspective, will also be sharing MBA admissions tips and how to navigate the GMAT requirement. We will allow for some Q&A at the end of the presentation, so please feel free to type your questions and comments into the Q&A box. We will also share a recording of this webinar afterwards via email, and we'll have it accessible through our website. So you'll be able to revisit all of the tools that Sergey covers today. So without further ado, I would love to hand the floor over to Sergey. Sergey, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Well, thanks very much, Darren. Very excited to be here. I've noticed that we really have people from all over the world joining this webinar tonight. Most of our participants, of course, are from the United States. We have quite a few people from Canada. We have a few people from Europe, some people from even Africa, and a few people from Asia. So really excited to have a wide variety of backgrounds on this call. And this is something that's truly reflective of the Hult International Business School. It's a school really that is probably unlike most of the schools where students come from all kinds of different backgrounds, and really the exposure to the international student body is just completely unparalleled. I want to make sure that just before we begin that everybody can hear me, because I see that some people were chatting in the chat box that you couldn't hear us. So if you could please check your speakers, I hope that everybody can hear us. And also we'll be doing some interactions throughout this webinar. So what we're gonna ask you to do is there's a Q&A box on top of your screen. So if we ask you a question, if you can please type in the Q&A box, this way we can only see it. And you can keep the main webinar chart for any technical problems, that's okay. So I wanted to ask you, awesome, some people are confirming that everything's loud and clear. I would like to ask you a question. And if you could please type it up in the Q&A box. Where are you right now in your GMAT prep or MBA admissions journey? If you've already been studying for some time, if you can just type up very briefly how many months or how many weeks have you been studying? And if you haven't been studying, you can just type, I haven't been studying, I'm just the beginning, because I'd like to understand a little bit about where you guys are. Also, if you've already applied, awesome, thank you very much. If you've already applied to Hult, then please type up that you've already applied. This would be good to know, to understand, again, where you are in your application cycle. Awesome, I see some people have been studying for 2 weeks. Some people have already been studying for a couple of years. This is great, awesome. I think wherever you are in your admissions journey, you will find that it's definitely going to be worth your while to talk about these tips. We are going to talk about tips that are really applicable regardless of where you are in your journey. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to start with some questions, because I'd like to take you guys outside of your comfort zone a little bit. The only way for us to learn is to be slightly uncomfortable. So I'm going to give you some questions to challenge you. I'll tell you my story really quickly, and then of course we'll get into the meat of this webinar of how do you get to the 700+ score in less than 3 months, because it's definitely possible. I've done it in much shorter time, so I'll tell you when we get to my story. And then of course we'll talk about the 7 secrets to 700+ scores. We'll talk about what's the first step, then I'm going to pass control back to Daren, who's going to talk about the Hult admissions tips. Beyond the GMAT, what else do you need to keep in mind when you apply? And of course, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So I'm going to begin with a verbal question. I wanted to show you a question that is a critical reasoning question. So it's a question where you have a passage and you need to answer certain questions about this passage. So here is what the question is asking. The statement above in boldface plays which of the following roles in ethicist's argument? Now the passage itself says ethicist, so it's a person who studies ethics, just in case you don't know. It would be a mistake to say that just because someone is not inclined to do otherwise, she or he does not deserve to be praised for doing what's right. For although it is true that we do consider people especially virtuous if they successfully resist a desire to do what's wrong, they're certainly no less virtuous if they have succeeded in extinguishing all such desires. So I want to ask you a question, guys. Who would like to read this passage more than once? If you can just type it up. Yeah, exactly. I know. It's definitely something that's hard to understand. This is a passage that's based on philosophy. I don't know if you've ever taken philosophy classes. To me, I did. They were incredibly boring. I think philosophy is really exciting, but it was hard to read and hard to understand. And by the way, some people were asking, how long is this webinar? We're going to go till 7 p.m. Eastern time tonight. Now wait till you see the answer choices. Answer choice A, it is a claim for which the argument attempts to provide justification. B, it makes an observation that according to the argument is insufficient to justify the claim that the argument concludes is false. It is a faulty claim, the acceptance of which the argument contends is a primary obstacle to some people's having an adequate conception of virtue. It is, according to the argument, a commonly held opinion that's nevertheless false, and it reports an observation that the argument claims is false, and according to the argument is sufficient to demonstrate the falsehood of the claim that the argument concludes is false. So how do you do this question in under 2 minutes if it's hard to understand not only the passage itself, but even the answer choices? And it's very easy to feel overwhelmed. So a person who is really focusing a lot on trying to comprehend this, or a person who is not really familiar with the GMAT strategies, this person will just probably read this passage several times, try to understand who is an ethicist, what is he trying to say, and then at the end, we'll probably go with a gut feel of what should be the right answer. But if we focus on really the structure of this passage as opposed to the content, the structure is way more important, because think about this. Do MBA schools really expect everybody who apply know a lot about philosophy or biology or chemistry or astronomy for that matter? Certainly not. But they do expect that MBA applicants should be able to weed through the junk and understand what's really important. So here's what's important here. A person who is trained to look for certain specific keywords and was a structure will see this. It would be a mistake to say something, for although it is true, these are the words that introduce our bolded part. And then after the bolded part, we have the certainly no less something. So the author begins by saying, somebody is saying something that's a mistake. So what does the author have to believe? Well, this is something that's called a contrasted opinion way to structure an argument. It's when the author is saying somebody believes something, this is a mistake. And what you can understand from this structure is that the author actually believes the opposite. Now let's take away the bolded part again. The author is saying, for although it is true, and then there's something, and then there's something else at the end. So what do you think about the bolded part? Do you think the author believes that the bolded part is true? Or do you think that the author believes that the bolded part is false? Now, obviously, the author believes that the bolded part is true, because he is saying, for although it is true. Right? So he agrees with that statement, at least, with the bolded part. Now let's take a look at the answer choices again. Answer choice C says it is a faulty claim. Remember, we're focusing on the bolded part. We just said that the author believes it's true. So C is out. D, it's according to the argument a commonly held opinion that's nevertheless false. Again, we just said the author believes it's true. So D is out as well. E, includes an observation that the argument claims is false. We just said the author believes it's true, so E is out as well. See, without even understanding what exactly does the author believe, we already eliminated 3 answer choices. Now let's take a look at A and B. A says it's a claim for which the argument attempts to provide justification, and B says it's an observation of the author. Now, if you've been studying a little bit for critical reasoning, you would understand that the claim is also called the conclusion. This is what the author believes. This is what the author is trying to prove. Now, in the contrasted opinion structure that we've just seen, the author is trying to prove that other people are wrong and he is right. That was what came before the bolded part. He said it would be a mistake to say something. I believe something else. But the bolded part was not the main claim. That's why we can eliminate A, because A says it's a claim or an argument. And the right answer is B. So let me ask you a question. Now that we've gone through this process, what do you think is the difficulty of this question? Like, is that like a 600 level question that maybe half of the people should be getting? Yeah, or do you think it's 700? Or maybe anybody believes it's more than 700? Some people are saying 600, some people are saying 700, 650. So this is really an example. Yeah, most people say, oh, somebody is saying 450. You probably have been studying philosophy. This is great. Congratulations. Now, let me tell you, this is probably one of the hardest questions you'll ever see in critical reasoning. This is definitely a question that's in the top 2-3%. So I would safely say this is a 740 plus level question, because a lot of people couldn't get it right because they're focusing on the wrong things. But once you know how to deal with this, it becomes much easier. Now, let me show you now a math question. And again, when it comes to verbal, a lot of people believe verbal is all about English language. Not really. You already know verbal is all about logic. It's all about weeding through the junk and seeing what's important. But when it comes to math, though, a lot of people believe that math is all about knowing math theory. It's important, though, but let's take a look at this question. The question is asking, Aaron will jog from home at X miles an hour and then walk back home by the same route at Y miles an hour. How many miles from home can Aaron jog so that he spends a total of T hours jogging and walking? Again, I'm going to ask the same question. Who would like to read this again? Yeah, definitely. One of the hardest things in this question, first of all, it's even hard to understand what the question is asking. Secondly, this is an example of a word problem. So it's a math question that's described in English, and we're usually not very comfortable with doing math questions that are described in English. So we need to translate it in something we can understand. Another thing that certainly adds to the complexity of this question is the use of variables. Variables are really not something we use in our everyday life. Like, you wouldn't say, I'm going to go to Walmart, then I'm going to buy X cans of soup. And I have $T, and I'm going to bring back Z cents in change, right? We're not really using variables, so it throws off a lot of people. So again, if you just read passively, and if you try to absorb everything that's given, and if you try to simply approach it as if a high school student would approach it, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. Now wait till you see the answer choices. Again, variables, like the X and a Y. So how do we deal with this type of a question? Now again, if we step back and understand what's really important to understand in this question, that this is a problem-solving question. So in a problem-solving question, the most important thing for us to understand is, what is the question asking? That's a number one thing. If you don't understand what the question is asking, it's going to be very hard to deal with the question. So let's read this. How many miles from home can Aaron jog? So this is what the question is asking. The question is asking us for the number of miles that he will jog. So effectively, he's decided to go at one speed from home to, let's say, his work or somewhere else, and then the different speed, he's deciding to come back. He's covering some sort of a distance. We know the total time. We need to find the distance. Now, there are different ways to do this question, but one of the ways you can do this question is you could see if the GMAT is trying to do something that's illegal. Let me ask you a question. What would you do if I were to ask you to add 3 miles to 5 hours? Is that a legal mathematical operation? Definitely not. Absolutely not. Right? You can only add units that are in the same. You can only add numbers in the same units. You can add hours to hours, you can add hours to seconds, but you cannot add hours to kilometers. Now let's take a look at what they're trying to do in B. X is the speed or the rate, T is the time. They're trying to add the rate to the time, miles an hour to the hours. That's illegal, even on the GMAT. So B is out. Now let's use the same strategy to see if we can eliminate any other answer choices. How about D? They're trying to add the X and the Y and the T. That's also illegal. So D is out as well. What about E? Same idea. Y plus T, that's illegal. So by just focusing on these kinds of traps that they're trying to create for us, we can eliminate the B, the D, and the E, and we're down to only 2 answer choices. Now, once we're down to 2 answer choices, we can see if we can try to understand if maybe an easier one of them is the right answer. And if it is, that's great. If it's not, then it's the other one. It looks like A is a little bit easier to deal with. There are only 3 variables there, and there are 5 in C. So let's see what we're going to get in A. In A, we have X times T divided by Y. X is in miles an hour, Y is in miles an hour. If we take miles an hour divided by miles an hour, we are going to get 1. All of the units are going to cancel out. What's going to be left is T. Now, T here is the time. We are not looking for the time. We're looking for the distance. So A has to be out because A gives us time. The only answer that's left is C. Now, somebody was asking, we thought that we're looking for T. This is actually something that I wanted to bring up because this is a very clever way for the GMAT to make you believe they're actually looking for T. I'm really glad that somebody brought this up because if you didn't, I would have brought it up. So again, thank you for your help. See, what they're doing here is they're saying how many miles an hour, and then if you're, again, reading this passively, the T hours jogging and walking, and you have the question mark at the end of that sentence. So if you lose your focus as you're reading this, you may forget that the question was actually the beginning of this sentence, not at the end. They're doing this on purpose. GMAT knows how to trick people. So it's absolutely something that you should be watching out for. So how does that sound? Again, see, what we've done here is we haven't really even done any math. We haven't even known the formula. Now, by the way, there is a formula for calculating the average speed, and then by knowing this formula, you could find the distance. But we focused on some of the bigger picture. We focused on understanding whether things could even work out. And we got to the right answer. We focused on the structure. We focused on thinking outside the box. Now, this is a question that's probably above 650. I would say that's around maybe 680 to 700 question. So it's certainly not an easy question. If you don't know the formula and if you don't know really how to look for these things, it could very easily become a hard question. Now, somebody was asking about A. The reason why we've eliminated A is because in A, we're dividing X over Y. X is miles an hour, Y is miles an hour. The units cancel out, we're left with T. Now, you could use smart numbers, you could pick some numbers. It's actually going to become a little more difficult if you do that. This problem is easier to deal with by using this unit strategy. Probably the second best strategy would be to pick numbers. So again, this is an example of really the question that that demonstrates how GMAT is not about simply knowing the formulas, not about memorizing them. It is all about thinking outside the box, thinking on what's really important. What am I, as a future business student, needing to understand in this question? I'm not a physicist. I'm not a mathematician. I need to understand what's important and how do I get to the right answer. So let me get some good news out. now that we've done these questions and we've really broken them down in a way that's very easy and very manageable, GMAT is probably one of the hardest tests you'll ever take. There are many reasons for that, and one of the reasons, of course, is that this is an adaptive test. It gets harder as you go along, as long as you're answering the questions correctly. It's also hard because you're competing with a lot of other people. And it's really important not only how well you do, but how well you do compared to some other people. A lot of the top schools require very high scores. So you may be in the top 10, 20% of everybody who takes this test worldwide, but maybe at that specific school, you might be at the bottom 20% with that specific score. Also, another reason is many people don't really know how to study for this test. And we'll cover this in a moment, but this test is not really a normal test. It doesn't measure your prior knowledge. It doesn't require you to memorize a lot of formulas from the book and just simply regurgitate them from your memory. Rather, it requires your ability to think critically and make decisions within a very limited time. For any of these questions you have, on average, not more than 2 minutes. On the verbal section, about 1 hour and 45 seconds. Now, I see that you're asking some general questions about the GMAT, so I will make sure that we answer them. Now, this is why business schools look at the GMAT scores very seriously. And that's why we're going to talk about this system of how do you really get a 700 plus score. So as we are doing this, if you don't mind, if you can just type up again in the Q&A box, what is your target score? Because I'd just like to know what you guys are looking for. Now, let me tell you very briefly about myself. I can't really believe I'm showing you this picture, but I wanted to show you that I didn't really start out as a 99th percentile GMAT instructor. I was just an average student that didn't even particularly like math. But I was really lucky because at some point I was very fortunate with amazing teachers who taught me not just how to do math, but how to think outside the box. This particularly was an amazing teacher. What he did is he taught us the school curriculum, and then he said, anybody who wants to stay after school, I'm going to show you a better way to do questions we've done in class. And I certainly stayed as much as I could. Now, as a result, I got myself 3 university degrees. My first 2 degrees were in rocket science, just like Daren mentioned. So I was actually working for the Russian Academy of Sciences. I was working on some algorithms to send rockets into space. Then I decided I need something more down to earth. I moved to North America, and I've decided to get an MBA. Of course, as everybody, when you're applying to an MBA, I had to do it the GMAT. So I did get a 700 plus score. I've only studied for about 2 weeks, so it's very legitimate. This is my real score report, just so you know, this is all legit. I got myself a degree. So I have graduated from an MBA program. I've worked in the industry for a number of years. And then I've really understood that, hey, maybe some of the decisions that I've made when it comes to picking the right school and maybe guiding me to the right path were not the best decisions. So I've really started helping a lot of people find this path. And it's really all about, the Admit Master is not only about the GMAT, it's all about the entire holistic approach. That's what Daren will talk about as well. It's all about the holistic way to understand what's really important for you in the career. So this is really what our company is about as well. I've been teaching the GMAT for about 8 years. And now my mission is really to reach through my work about 100,000 people to teach them how to think differently. This is something we call here thinking like a CEO at Admit Master, how to stay committed, how to achieve your ambitious career goals. And I'm probably about 10% there. I'm doing a lot of public speaking as well. So you guys, by being here, you certainly contribute towards my goal. Now, I think it's enough about me. Here's one thing about 700 plus scores. And that's something that I very strongly believe, and I've seen it a lot of times, is that anybody can get a score of 700 plus. That's absolutely honest to God truth, because GMAT is not, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to be a mathematician. So here's an example of one of my students. He was actually a musician. He didn't take math in a high school. He ended up with a score of 48 on quant, 47 in verbal, overall 760, got into one of the good schools and got a full ride scholarship because of his score. Another person started with 610, and he thought that's enough, but he decided to study a little more, really learn the path to the GMAT, learn these strategies. He ended up with 760, again, got into one of the top schools in the world. So it is certainly possible, and anybody can do it. So I want to ask you a question. Would you like to be one of these success stories and get multiple offers from top business schools that you actually want to go to, and sometimes with large scholarships? Because if you do, that's possible. And I've seen it a lot of times. I've been in this industry since 2009. I've seen a lot of times somebody would come in really struggling to break the 400 and end up with something that's close to 700 or possibly even above 700. Absolutely, that is possible. Anybody can do this. And the reason why is, I'll get to this in a moment, GMAT is a different exam. It's not the purely academic exam. It's more of a skills-based exam. And learning how to do this exam is kind of like learning how to drive. If you can believe you can learn how to drive a car, you can learn how to get a 700 plus score. It's a slightly different challenge. It's a mental challenge, but you can do it. So how do we do this? Well, let's get into the system. The system, or the 7 secrets to 700 plus scores. So we'll walk through these 7 steps. Please take notes, and we will, of course, I will share the notes with you, so you get an email from me tomorrow with a summary of these 7 steps, and of course, we are recording this webinar as well. So these steps are really, really important. Step number 1, you have to decide why you want it. You really have to have a vision. That's so important for you to stay motivated. Because if you don't know why you want an MBA, if you don't know what is it going to do for your career, it's very easy to get discouraged, because it is a lot of work to get into a top school. It's going to be super rewarding, but trust me, the process of getting into the MBA program is something that's difficult for a lot of people. So how do you have this vision? Well, here are some of the questions that you can ask yourself. Question number 1, why do you want to do an MBA? Exactly, why did you decide to do this? How is it going to help you? And yes, you will be able to review the recorded webinar. We will send the link to everyone. And I will send also the summary of these notes. So why do you want to do this? Why have you decided to do this? Keep reminding yourself, what are some of the great things you're going to gain with an MBA degree? And some of the people might say, I might be able to switch my careers. I might be able to travel to a new country. I might be able to have more variety in my career. I might be able to make more money. Some of the people are more motivated by avoiding negative things. For example, what are some of the not so great things you're going to be able to avoid? For example, I would be able to avoid getting stuck in my job that I don't like. I don't have to wait for my boss to retire. If my boss is only 32, maybe I can skip a step and become a boss of my boss, or go to a different company altogether. And why is MBA a priority right now? Why do you want to do it now and not in 10 years? Now, these are some very important questions. And if you need any help understanding the answers to this question, I'm happy to chat with you one-on-one. But these are the questions that really, before you even apply to an MBA program, you should really be answering yourself these questions, because when Daren gets on this webinar back, she's going to share that these are the questions that an admissions director would like to also see. They want to know, the business schools would like to know that you're really committed, that you've answered these questions. And maybe you don't know exactly where you're going to go, but they want to understand that you've done some digging and you really have done some self-reflection, and you understand why it's important for you. And of course, why it's going to be important to go to that specific school. So that's really the first step, and you have to go through this step if you want to be successful. Now, once you've gone through this step, then the second very important step is you have to have a plan. And specifically, if you talk about the GMAT, it is very easy to go in all kinds of different directions, because this is the test that's, again, hard to study for. What many people don't know is, how do we even understand if you are prepared or not? What do you begin focusing on? And we'll get to this in a moment. But you need to have a plan, right? What's my first step? What's my second step? How do I know I'm progressing? How do I know I'm getting closer to my goal? How much time should I be spending? So these are some of the questions that you should be asking yourself. First of all, where am I right now? This is an exam of a skill, of a certain mental skill of thinking a certain way. Everybody has these skills, right? In fact, when this test originated, not a lot of people even were studying for it. And the organization that created it, the GMAT, they believe this is some sort of an aptitude test. So you should be tested based on the skills you've already developed. So everybody has these skills. You might be surprised. You might be taking a test. I've had some students who've taken the test and their first practice score was 690. And what? Oh my God, I didn't even believe that I could get this kind of a score. They ended up, of course, in the high 700s. They didn't even know that this is something they could do. Now, on the other hand, if you're getting a score that's, let's say, in the 300s or 400s, this is not a problem. This is a diagnostic test, not a prognostic test. This is where you are right now, not necessarily where you're going to be. And again, you're asking some questions about GRE and everything. I'm going to make sure that we answer these questions at the end. So please stick around. Now, the second thing is, what's your target score? You might be at, let's say, 500 right now, and you would like to get 700. So you need to understand, what's my gap? Right? If you could think of an example, let's say you need to drive to a different side of town. Well, you are right now here downtown, you need to get to the burbs. I am here, I need to understand what's my present position, where do I need to be, then I'll program into the GPS, and then I'll have a path. Right? So you need to understand how much time do I have and what distance do I need to cover, and how fast can I move? What's my weekly availability? Right? So let's say I have maybe 1 month, and right now I'm at 400, I need 700, and I can only spend 2 hours a week. That probably is not going to happen. Right? All of these things really work together. The faster you can move, the more time you can spend during the week, the faster you can move to your score. If you need a much smaller score improvement, maybe you don't need that much time, or maybe you don't need to spend as much time during the week. Also, with this test, there's probably the minimum and maximum amount of time that you want to study during the week. Really, if you study anywhere less than maybe 3 or 4 hours a week, you won't see any progress. It's like going to the gym once a month. If anybody ever tried to the gym, you're not really going to see any progress. And also, if you go to the gym for 8 hours a day, you're not going to see any problem. You just can overwhelm and kill yourself. So really, the sweet spot is anywhere from about 2.5 to about 6 hours a day that you can study, and probably about 5 days a week. And of course, you want to think about your backup plan. If you're really cutting your GMAT preparation very close to your application deadlines, you want to see what would happen if I don't score well, right? Anything could happen. Maybe the bus breaks down and I don't make it to the test center. Maybe, God forbid, I catch a flu. But you always want to have some sort of a backup plan, so you don't want to cut it too close to the application deadlines. So this is going to be your strategic plan. And another thing that you may want to do is see how well you chart toward your strategic plan. Are you actually spending the 6 hours a day that you said you will? And if you're not, maybe you need a little more time. You also need to take diagnostic tests all throughout your study if you want to know if you are progressing or not. So once you have a strategic plan, once you know exactly why you want to do it, there's something that's really important, is you need to build a strong foundation. We've just said that this is not a test of math, it's not a test of English, and yet, if you don't really know the basics, it's going to be very hard to advance. Right? If you don't know that you can't really add numbers with different units, it's going to be very hard to deal with these types of problems. So how do you build a strong foundation? Number one, you have to learn the required math theory. And here's good news. Theory is finite. There's not that much of it. It's mostly from grades 9 and 10. You have done it before, and you can certainly do it again. I mentioned one of my students who was a musician. He actually didn't go to grades 9 and 10, and he could actually still do it. So if you have done math in high school, you can definitely do it. Now, another thing in the verbal is you will need to learn some of the rules of the basic English grammar. For example, subject-verb agreement, verb tenses. These are some of the main basic things that you will need to learn. And also another thing that you want to do is you want to start reading with a purpose and reading every day. When we talk about reading with a purpose, we talk about really reading for the structure, because the structure here is really important. Remember, SS's question was much more important how the question is structured as opposed to what the question is trying to say. So this is something that you want to do when you read with a purpose. Now, how do you actually squeeze in the time? Somebody was asking, how do you squeeze in time if you're working full time? Well, one of the things that you can do is you can allocate time after work or in the morning where you're going to work on the questions. This is how you're going to structure your study day. And you probably won't be able to study for more than 2 to 2.5 hours a day. But again, I'm going to offer you to sit down one-on-one at the end of this webinar, and I'm going to be happy to review your schedule and help you understand where can you squeeze in your study. One of the other things you can do is some of these basic things, like for example, learning the required math theory or reading. These are the shorter sessions that you can squeeze in your day. For example, as you're commuting to work, maybe you pick up a copy of Harvard Business Review or The Economist and read a couple of articles. Maybe if you're on lunchtime and you have access to a computer, you can use websites like the Khan Academy or IXL to really brush up on your skills. So you could really squeeze in these short sessions as opposed to just overwhelming yourself with one long session. Now, let's get to secret number 3. So you built a vision, you have a strategic plan, you have built a strong foundation. How do you actually study for the GMAT? What a lot of people do is approach the GMAT as if it's a normal test. What they would do is they would go to the bookstore, they'll pick up a set of books, and they'll usually pick up the official set because, hey, that's an official guide, so it should really help you. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to memorize what's in a book. They'll read the book and they're saying, as long as I memorize 100% what's in the book, I'll be prepared. But here's the trick. The memorization here won't work. If you simply memorize the way they do the questions, or if anybody ever tried to read the explanations from the official guide, they're completely terrible because they're described from a very theoretical perspective. I don't know if you guys can add your comments whether anybody actually tried to do this. So just simply memorization wouldn't work. So what a lot of people do are saying, well, this book is not enough. Let me go and pick up some more books. Maybe the 12 books. And they're overwhelmed with the 12 books. They're saying, I just need something ultimate, the premier, right? Or I just need to crack the GMAT. Or just give me the latest and greatest, the most up-to-date, right? And they just overwhelm themselves with so many books. And there's no structure. Somebody is saying worst explanation of the planet. Absolutely, that's true. So there's no structure to the studying. It's very easy to feel overwhelmed and to give up. Now, this is not to say that the books are bad, but the books can only show you the way. They're guides for you to really develop these skills on your own. So if you use the books, make sure you use the books for the right purpose. The official guide is an awesome book for practice. It doesn't teach you anything. If you want to actually learn the strategies, you can do some other things. You can pick up some strategy guides. You can use some online resources. You could come to a classroom. You can work privately with a tutor, but you really need to look beyond the official guide. However, for practice, the official guides are completely awesome. So make sure you really focus on developing these skills as opposed to trying to memorize, and really look at what works, what doesn't work. And really the way that we think about this is you want to develop thinking a different way, thinking like a CEO. There's a paradigm where when I teach classes, I always say, look, you got to learn how to think differently. If you want to be a future CEO, you want to learn first how to think like one. And if you want results in the top 10%, find out what the other 90% of people do and don't do it. Better yet, find what the top 10% of people do and do it. Now, we already understand what does it take to develop skills, but how do you actually go through this process? How do we develop these skills? A very, very important thing to do on this journey is going to be to learn from your own mistakes. If you ever learned how to play a difficult game, such as a game of golf, just if you watch somebody do it, doesn't necessarily mean you are going to be able to do it, right? And even if you say, well, I can't seem to swing right. Hey, you see Tiger Woods playing on the next hole, you say, hey, Tiger, come in, show me how to do it. So Tiger shows you, and hey, the Tiger goes hole in one, and then you're trying your own, and the ball goes in a different direction, right? Because what a lot of people do is they attempt a question. If they don't get it right, they read an explanation, and then they're saying, okay, that's fine, I'm gonna move on. That's kind of like saying the ball doesn't go where I want it to go. Tiger, show me how you do it, and I'm gonna move on to the next hole, right? You really need to see how you are doing this and then keep practicing and understanding and learning from your own mistakes. Now, how do you actually learn from your own mistakes? Number one, make sure you learn the strategies first. It's very, very important. Only after that you can go into practice. Don't simply practice until you've learned how to do it. That's kind of like saying, Mom, give me the keys, I'm gonna go on the highway, right? First, learn how to drive a car, then do the practice. Don't read explanation of the official guide. Like, seriously, I make my students tear off pages from the official guide and burn them in their fireplace because they're completely useless. It's going to force them to do explanations. What we do in our courses is we don't actually give people explanations for the questions we do in class. They're available by video, so they have to log in, watch the video, but it kind of forces them to think first, think outside the box. And there are all kinds of great ways to learn the strategies. Again, we'll talk about this in a moment. Make sure you keep an error log. So write down when you're making mistakes. And sometimes it could be quite depressing. But you know what? If you're making the same mistake again and again and again, there will be a clue that you need to work on it. Make sure you also keep a formula log. There are some formulas that you need to know for the test. Let's just say that, yes, this is something you have to do. So if you forgot a formula, write it down. If you forgot it now, you might forget it as you get closer to the test. And this is something that's good to review before your test day. Also, make sure you celebrate small successes. When somebody's studying with us, usually they would do 10 questions at a time. And with every 10 questions, there will be a small success. And then every time you do these 10 questions, you'll see, hey, I'm improving. Now I'm getting more questions right, or I'm getting harder questions now right. So make sure that you pat yourself in the back and say, yes, I'm improving. Don't make it too hard on yourself. A very important thing is going to be, of course, to manage your time. And manage your time on a test. Especially, I know if you ever heard that the first 10 questions are very, very important on a test. That is only partially true. If you spend a lot of time doing the first 10 questions, by the time you get to the hard questions, you may have run out of time. It's a computer adaptive test. So you need to really pace yourself well. Don't spend too much time on the first 10 questions. They are important because the swing between the difficulty of the questions is greater at first. But if you spend way too much time, you end up more towards the end of the test where a lot of very hard questions with not a lot of time left. Remember that 25% of questions don't count. If you don't know how to do the question, instead of spending 10 minutes on the question, just comfort yourself with the fact that there's 1 in 4 chance that this question maybe didn't count at all. Make sure you practice under time conditions. All the students who study with us, we also have lots of online resources as well, and the online platform where you can practice under time conditions where there are approximately 5,500 different questions, and you can pick and choose the questions, the difficulty of the questions, the topic of the questions. So make sure, especially as you get closer to the test day, then all of your practice in the time conditions, make sure you take at least 6 to 8 practice tests. It is a grueling exercise to be there for 4 hours. So if you haven't taken any practice tests, all you've done is 10 questions at a time, you might feel like you're drinking from a fire hose, or you might be completely overwhelmed and completely tired by the end of the 4 hours, or much earlier than that. And what's going to be really important is you keep the confidence. confidence has to be key. You can never let your confidence slide throughout the test. Now, in terms of the time that you want to spend studying, I know you guys try to beat the GMAT. That's an awesome resource, by the way. But sometimes I get these success stories, and recently I've just seen 530 to 560 to 690 completing a 7-year journey. Like, seriously, I want to pull my head. 7 years to study for the GMAT? I certainly hope that you're going to take as much time to study. Yes, exactly. I know. Now let's get to our last secret. Secret number 7, you got to know the game. If you want a top score, you gotta really see through the matrix. Everybody sees a woman in the red dress. You see the numbers, the little green numbers that Neo saw. So you gotta be able, through practice, to recognize patterns, to get somebody to show you the patterns. You gotta be able to avoid traps. You gotta be able to eliminate the answers that are wrong and know why they're wrong. And you gotta be able to really see through the matrix. You got to be able to see through the games they're playing and really to not fall into their traps. Don't live the life that they're hoping you're going to live. See beyond the test. There's a way to do this. Now, what a lot of people do when they're studying for the GMAT, they focus on this. They focus on learning the rules. They focus on learning the theory. They simply focus on learning how to play. Well, let me ask you a question. Do you want to learn how to play? Or do you want to learn how to win the game? If you focus on how to win the game, and ask yourself very different questions. And I work with my students. The average score of our students who take our course is 670, because we are focusing on how to win the game, not how to play the game. That's well above the industry average, right? Ask yourself different questions. You're going to come up with different answers. So here's the 7 steps, and like I promised, I will send them to you. Know why you want it, have a strategic plan, build a very strong foundation, focus on developing your skills, learn from your mistakes, manage your time, and know how to win the game. Now, I wish I could show you more tonight, but I want to ask you an important question. What would be like if you know that you can accelerate your career, do something you really love, and make 6+ figures a year for the rest of your working life? If you know for sure you can do it, how would you feel? What kind of decisions you can make? And most importantly, what if you had absolute certainty that you can achieve it? Here's the thing. A lot of people have already gone through this process. There are thousands of people who have already done it. Gotten great scores, got into the top schools. So the journey, really, as you probably know, the famous quote from Lao Tzu, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. So sometimes you don't yet know how to get there. We've outlined here really the framework. We can go way deeper into this, but here's a framework of how you can get to a top score. I'm happy to have a one-on-one discussion. You gotta take the first step. And really the first step should be, I gotta understand where I am right now. And there's a free practice test that you can take on our website. You can go to admitmaster.com/free test. It's completely free. You're gonna get your score, and what we can do as a bonus for attending this webinar is you're gonna get a 7-day free trial to this learning system, and we also will be able to connect. You'll get a link to this class, and you also get an email from me asking if you'd like to connect one-on-one. I'm gonna be happy to review your study plan and give you feedback, completely free. Now, if you are in one of these 3 cities, Toronto, Chicago, and Montreal, then I'm going to be happy to see you in person. We actually offer some free classes. There's going to be free GMAT Master Refresher classes coming up. There's one in Montreal, one in Toronto, and one in Chicago in the next couple of weeks. And of course, also, if you are in these 3 cities, we are offering a classroom program. That's really a program that's unlike anything else. It has 50 hours in class. It's only taught by people who are full-time, who have scored at least 750, 760 on the test. It includes some private tutoring, all study material, the platform that I've mentioned, and the free course retakes. Now, we do offer the same class online as well. So if you're not in any of these 3 cities, then we can certainly chat as well. Now, before I pass control to Daren, and before we answer the question, I want to say one thing. There's always an excuse. And by the way, I will be in Boston, definitely, and we will be looking to put together this class in Boston, but you can meet us in person. You can chat on February 2nd. They will coming up in a moment. But I want to say that if you are not really achieving something that you want in life, there's always an excuse. There's not a good reason, because most people who fail in their dream fail not from a lack of ability, but really from a lack of commitment. Because GMAT is not a test of intelligence, it's not a test of subject matter, it's not an IQ test, not a math test, not an English test. It is a test of studying smart. And if you don't yet know how to study smart, one of the things that we do, for example, in our class, is we go through some learning exercises and we actually teach you how to study, because that's very, very important. Most people don't know how to do this. If you know how to study smart, you're going to reap the benefits even throughout your MBA program. So I'm going to get Daren to just talk for a few minutes about the Hult method, about the applications, and then I'll make sure that we answer all of the questions. And we can stay behind also if you have more questions. So Daren, if you don't mind, just share a few tips on the admissions, and then we'll be sure to answer the questions that popped up, and I'll, in the meantime, review all the questions here in the chat box. So thank you very much, guys. Daren.
Thank you, Sergey. So just as Sergey was going over how to tackle the GMAT, breaking it down piece by piece, I also want to take a look at how do admissions committees from MBA programs actually use the GMAT when they're evaluating different candidates. So from a Hult perspective, we actually get to know you as a candidate first. I saw someone asked a little earlier in our Q&A box if you're allowed to apply to a school pending your GMAT or your GRE score. The answer for Hult is yes. So we consider your education, your work history, your professional references, your essay, the interview results with a member of our admissions committee, and also your test scores. So you have so many opportunities to shine throughout the admissions process and to show us who you are. So that should take some of the pressure off as you prepare to take the GMAT. And again, most schools do require it, but it is nice to know that you're going to be known as a person, as a candidate. We're going to get to see how you think, how you tackle problems, how you interact with others. And all of that is going to be weighted as we decide whether or not you would be a great fit for our school. At Hult, we separate the admissions process into stages. So we start with what is called a preliminary application. This is all done online, and you don't need the GMAT for this stage. We get to know who you are from a very basic view of what your employment history is, what your education background is, which campus you would like to study on. So this is just letting us know from an early point that you're interested in the program. Once we receive this preliminary application, we then work with you to get all of your supporting documents, and those would include your letters of recommendation, your personal statement essay, your transcripts from undergrad, and we'll also invite you to an admissions interview once all of those pieces have been gathered. Finally, you can add your GMAT or your GRE score at a later time. So at Hult, we allow candidates to be reviewed on a conditional acceptance basis. So this means, again, we're getting to know you as a candidate. If everything looks great, if your interview goes well, you would receive a conditional acceptance, and then a full acceptance would just be pending the results of your GMAT. So we also will assign you an enrollment director for your region and an application manager as you continue through this admissions process. So next, I would like to look at the GMAT score, specifically the requirements, once you're ready to add this piece to your application. So we do require that your GMAT score be no more than 5 years old. And this is, again, because you're coming into a program, we want to make sure that you're fit to be in the classroom, you're ready. So having a score that's no more than 5 years old is required. We do accept a range of scores. Some schools will say you have to have this score and above to even be considered. We don't follow that rule book. We believe that the most important thing when evaluating candidates is their professional experience. We get to know you in so many other ways. The GMAT is, of course, supplemental, but I've seen a range of scores come in through the program, and I will go over, if you do have something over 650, then that will qualify you for certain scholarship. At Hult, we accept both a GMAT and a GRE. A lot of schools have now accepted both GMAT and GRE, and some even have their own aptitude tests, which can be supplemental to that score, or which can also be taken in lieu of that test. And finally, we do have Academic Excellence Scholarship, which at Hult is tiered. We have 2 tiers. The first is for 650 and above, and then 700 and above. So depending on where your score falls, you might be eligible for extra scholarship because we know that you've taken a lot of time invested into the GMAT and have scored really well. A few more admissions tips that I would like to share is, first, don't cancel your score. I know of students in the past that have canceled their scores simply out of fear. They felt a little off that day. They're convinced that they could have done better, but I would encourage you not to cancel your score because, as I mentioned before, we do factor in many things while reviewing your application. So you might have done better than you realized. If you have a high GMAT, it can make up for other perceived weaknesses in your application, such as a lower GPA from undergrad, or if you have just on the cusp of what we're looking for work experience, if you're at the lower end of that requirement, having a higher GMAT is showing to us again that you're ready to come into this professional program. On the opposite end, a lower GMAT can be corrected at Hult with an internal exam or a second attempt. So like I mentioned before, you will be assigned a director of enrollment. Work with this person, understand where you fall in their group of candidates, what might be expected of you from the admissions committee so that you can better navigate this process. And finally, there is a free practice test at admitmaster.com/free test that you can take. The more free resources that you're able to take advantage of, the better. So start early, get a sense of where you fall with the GMAT, and then you'll be able to create a strategy from there. Finally, our next deadline, we have rolling admissions at Hult, but our next deadline is on February 5th, and it is our round 3 deadline. We still have scholarships available. As you may recall, we are just requiring the preliminary application first. So everything can be done online, starting at hult.edu. We will pair you with an enrollment director and also an application manager and be able to assess all of this with you, whether or not you have the GMAT in place yet. Great. And Sergey, would you like to share what fairs we'll be at next?
Yes, exactly. So both Daren and I, or Daren's colleagues, are going to be at some of these fairs. So if you are in any of these cities, Montreal, Chicago, Boston, Toronto, please make sure to come and visit us either at QS World MBA Tour or the MBA Tour. You can go on our website, admitmaster.com. Sometimes there's an admission fee to these fairs. I think it's up to $15. So if you can register through our website, we will make sure that we pass on your information and you're going to be able to get in for free. Now, before we get into Q&A, or actually I think it's about time for us to get into Q&A, I would like to answer some questions that have already popped up here, and then we could make sure that to address all of the other questions. Some of the people are saying, how many times would you really be able to take the test? Now, there's a lifetime maximum on taking the test 8 times. You can only take the GMAT 8 times in your life. That's something that's been introduced recently. You can take it 5 times a year. However, if you take it too many times, business schools might question if this is the right career path that you've chosen for yourself. So make sure that you're really doing a lot of practice tests. We give our students 9 online practice tests, and there are some practice tests that are available on mba.com as well. And if you're not happy with your score, make sure you cancel it as well. Now, canceled scores do count towards your lifetime maximum. Some of the people are saying, how long is our program? Now, our program is quite intensive. It's 8 hours a week for 6 weeks. And it also includes some private tutoring time. So we offer this program in person in Toronto, Montreal, and Chicago. We will be offering it in Boston shortly. It is also possible to take it online as well. It takes the same duration, 6 weeks. Some of the people were asking about the GMAT versus GRE. GRE is a more academic exam, and GMAT is more of an exam of logic. GMAT is much closer to an exam such as LSAT. It's really all about logic. GRE, for example, if you are not a native speaker, GRE might be difficult for you because GRE is testing vocabulary. The timing on the GRE is also a little harder. Some people are saying math is easier. The reason why GRE is not an adaptive test. It doesn't adapt within the section, it adapts between the sections. So from one section to another, you have two verbal sections. And if you're doing well on the first one, then the second one is going to get harder. But the timing is more brutal on the GRE. And generally, you will learn better skills through the GMAT. Also, if you're applying to multiple schools, then some of the schools don't accept the GRE. And just in general, you will be able to benefit longer term from the GMAT if you focus on developing these skills of thinking like a CEO.
Great. And Sergey, really quickly just wanted to cut in from an admissions perspective, at least at Hult. Someone asked whether the GMAT or the GRE would be preferred. We don't place any emphasis on one over the other. So if candidates do already have a GRE, or if they prefer to take the GRE, again, it's great to look at all the schools you're considering and see if they accept it. But from our admissions perspective, we will accept both of them and don't favor one over the other.
Yeah, exactly. If you already have the GMAT, then the GRE, then certainly don't do it another score. If your score is good, don't do another one. Some people are saying whether I should cancel my score when it is poor. Absolutely. Don't show a bad score to a business school if it's really bad. If it's a reasonable score, and you could talk with Daren if what would be a reasonable score, right? But if it's a really poor score, then maybe you don't want to show it, especially if you maybe haven't been studying properly and you want to begin studying properly. Right, Daren?
Yeah, I would agree with that. So if it is a score that you think is really bad and doesn't in any way reflect what candidate you are for the program, then you can cancel it. But if it's something that's almost borderline, if you were expecting upper 600, 700, and you got low 600 or even in the 500s, I would again encourage you to have a really honest conversation with your admissions director. And rather than having those scores sent immediately to the schools, you could have these conversations and then pay a little extra to have them sent later on if it's something that you feel after having that honest conversation would be satisfactory to the admissions committee.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, thanks, Daren. Somebody was saying about the TOEFL. You do need to take TOEFL if you don't have a degree in English. So that's something that certainly you can ask your admission advisor as well. Some people were also asking. I'll get to the other question. We will stay as long as you have questions, but I want to answer them in the order of priority. So I'll answer the question about the 10 questions. What are some of the good resources to build a great MBA application? Now, in terms of MBA application, MBA will usually not be sufficient, and really we can have a much deeper discussion about the MBA application. Here's one important thing: is admission advisors from business schools, such as Daren, are really your points of contact. So you can have a discussion with Daren and really talk about how to put together a winning application, because the business school wants to see a very good application from you, because ultimately they're going to help you change your career, find a job when you graduate. So they want to make sure that you have this good application. Now, in terms of if you don't feel comfortable maybe speaking with Daren, if that's okay, I would say you could speak with me. We have a few people who are working with me as well, who maybe used to work for business school before, and they can look at your application and give you this candid opinion. So if you want to get in touch with me, we do admissions consulting as well, and we can offer you a free consultation. We can take a look at your resume and just chat in general about how you could present yourself better to a business school. So certainly MBA.com has a lot of resources for the GMAT, again with terrible explanations, but not a lot of resources when it comes to application.
Yeah, and I would encourage you really to reach out to the admissions committee there or to the enrollment directors at the schools you're interested. And at least from a Hult perspective, we work with candidates one-on-one. We get to know you. So we're able to help you build that application. You're not blindly submitting it online and keeping your fingers crossed. It is a collaborative process. And I also have a webinar that I recorded in the past, which does contain a lot of general MBA admissions tips, which I would be happy to share. So as you can see at the bottom of the screen, that is my direct email address. Feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to send you the recording of this other webinar that I conducted for admissions tips. It's only about 15 minutes long, but has a lot of good resources available.
Great, thank you, Daren. Somebody was asking whether, Alexandra was asking whether we offer shorter courses. Yes, we do. In certain cities, we offer shorter classroom courses. However, online courses could be customized really to any duration. The most important thing about these online courses is that they are customized to each person. So at the beginning of every class, whether it's a classroom or an online class, you're sitting down with a 99th percentile instructor, somebody like myself or one of my colleagues, and we are working out a study plan for you. So we're trying to understand answer all of these questions and build this plan, and then make sure that you have the lessons that fit within your plan so you can achieve that goal. Some of the people were saying about the first 10 questions. So here's an important thing about the first 10 questions on the GMAT. The GMAT is an adaptive test. What this means is that it adapts to your performance. The better you do, the harder the questions are going to become. The test is trying to figure out your level, but giving you questions of various difficulties and trying to understand if you answer the question correctly or incorrectly. For example, if they throw a 700 level question at you and you got it wrong, they'll say, maybe this person's not quite at 700. Let's give him a 680 question. Let's see if he or she can answer the 680 question. And if they do, okay, maybe we'll give them a 690 question. Let's see if maybe they're at 690 level. So at the beginning, they're starting off everyone at 550. Right? And they would want to understand very quickly where you are. So at the beginning, let's say you got a 550 question right, maybe the next question they're going to give you is going to be 620 right away. Right? Because they want to know, do you need to improve by much or by just a little? As you get to later questions in your test, then really they've already figured out that you are somewhere, say, between 700 and 720, but they want to understand a little bit better. Are you 700? Are you 710? Or are you 720? So the swing between the difficulty of the questions is much greater at the beginning. So it's a little more important to get these questions right. However, please remember that these questions at the beginning are probably easier than you want to see, right? They're going to be 550 and then maybe 600. At the end of the test, you want to see a lot of 700 level questions if you want a 700 score. So certainly, you want to manage your time well. You don't want to just completely spend a lot of time on the easy questions and medium questions at the beginning and then don't have time for hard questions. Now, somebody was asking about scholarships based on the GMAT. Now, I'm just going to digress a little and let Daren answer this, but in terms of the GMAT, again, you can check our website. I will send you an email as well tomorrow. Somebody was asking how much does our course cost. You will get an exclusive discount because you've attended this webinar, just in case you later on decide to take our class. But we also do offer scholarships towards the GMAT course. You can even win a complete free GMAT course. But what you have to do, though, to win a scholarship is to attend one of our events in one of these cities, Chicago, Montreal, Toronto, or Boston. And if you'd like to get put in a draw for a scholarship, if you're not in one of these cities, just send me an email. We'll write out your ballot, we'll put it in the hat, and we'll make sure we draw your name. So you could even win a scholarship towards the GMAT. But Daren, could you maybe comment on how the GMAT contributes towards a scholarship, towards the MBA? Because, of course, MBA is much more expensive than the GMAT course.
Yes, of course. So for the MBA, we are, of course, factoring in your GMAT for the Academic Excellence Scholarship. And this is, again, from Hult. I know a lot of other MBA programs are similar, but we would, for the Academic Excellence Scholarship, only look at your GMAT or GRE score. Alternatively, we have a lot of other scholarships which are merit-based. So we would be factoring in your background as a candidate, in terms of what type of work you've been doing. What is your opportunity for leadership if you don't have a leadership role yet? So we have a lot of different scholarships available, and these can be awarded even prior to taking the GMAT. So that's something that you can check out on our website again, hult.edu. I see we have some other admissions related questions. One of them is, what are the best people to get letters of recommendation from? That's a really good question. We're not just looking for people who have very high positions in the company that you work for to write your letters of recommendation. We would rather have someone who is closer to you. It could be your direct line supervisor. It could be a direct colleague, or even a client that you've worked with. We're not necessarily looking for the title of this person in terms of how high ranking they are in the company, but rather how much can they speak to you as a candidate in the MBA, which is how are you as a professional. That very often equates to how you'll do in this type of a program. You're coming in as an adult, you're a few years into your career, some of you several years into your career. So we want to know, we want to hear from the people that are closest to you. And a lot of schools also do have a limit on how recent those letters of recommendation need to be. At Hult specifically, they need to be from a position that you have held within the past 2 years. So make sure that you're getting these referees to write your letters that are from either your current position or one just before that. And if you're ever in an awkward position at work and do not want to announce to everyone that you are leaving by asking people for MBA letter of recommendations, this is a conversation that you can have with your director of enrollment, because there are some ways around that.
Yes, thank you, Daren. Somebody was asking, Angelina was asking, how do I get practice questions? Well, there are lots of good resources for practice questions. Of course, there are official sources. There's sources such as GMAT Club or Beat the GMAT. But it's not just the quantity of the question, but it's also the quality of the questions. It's very, very important. Just to give you an idea, anybody who studies with us, either through an online program, or even if you study with another course and you get access to our online program, that program has 5,500 questions. So nobody in their right mind would ever be able to do 5,500 questions. That's insane. So why do we have that many questions? It's because somebody might have difficulty with triangles, while somebody else needs to work on quadratic equations, and somebody else needs to work on the subject-verb agreement. So you want to focus on your biggest areas of improvement if you want to see the biggest improvement on your score. The GMAT is an exam that favors overcoming your weaknesses as opposed to continue working on your strengths. Of course, you want your strengths to shine, but if something is really a topic or the area that you haven't mastered, that you are struggling with, you want to focus on that area primarily. So you want to do a lot of questions in that area. So that's why some of the online systems, like our online system, is the one that I don't know if anybody ever heard of Magoosh. So our online system is about 5 or 6 times more questions than Magoosh. It's a more kind of professional grade system. It's primarily used as a support for classes as opposed to a standalone. But also, even if you use it as a standalone, it has a lot of questions. And you could, again, choose the difficulty of the questions just to make sure you're practicing that area where you struggle the most. Okay, somebody was asking, and again, we can go on. Daren, I don't know about you, but I think we can go on as long as we have questions.
Yeah, I think I haven't seen any filter in yet, but if there's any that we haven't gotten to yet, we can certainly cover those.
Yeah, there's a question here about what if you get a low score the first time you take it, but then improve significantly, but you're still below 600. Should you still apply, and what would the schools? How would the schools look at your application? Well, one of the things that you want to consider when you are applying is you don't want to send a lot of scores to a business school that are similar to each other. If you've taken a test and, for example, you've scored 500, and you've taken the test again and you scored 500 again, and maybe 490 and then 510, and if you just keep doing this, it's actually worse than sending to the school just one score. because then the school will get a signal that maybe you're not improving, you're not learning from your mistakes, you're struggling, and will you be maybe struggling in the MBA program? Right? If that is what it is what it is. Apply, make sure your application is strong. Of course, work on your GMAT if you can. Anybody can. Just make sure you get the right resources. But don't continue struggling for 7 years without improving. It can actually hurt your chances. Would you agree, Daren?
Yes, I would completely agree with that. And again, having an open conversation with the school of choice of interest is always a really good way to gauge what they're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Talk to them and ask them, and just say, look, and you could say something honestly. You can say, you know what, I didn't really expect what this test was going to be about, and maybe I haven't studied properly. I didn't get the right resources. I've learned from my mistakes. So I got a score of, let's say, 520, 540, 560, 600, whatever that score is, and say, I'm totally committed to getting a higher score. Is that something you would recommend? And then they can tell you. And maybe that's not something you want to do. Maybe your application is very strong otherwise. Or maybe that is something you want to do because maybe you want to get a scholarship. Somebody was saying, with our courses, there was a discount for the webinar. Yes, it is true. The discount is not posted on our website, so I will make sure that I'll send you an email tomorrow. There'll be a couple of emails, one with a summary of what we discussed with these 7 steps. There'll be another email with the link and with the discounts as well. Somebody was asking, what is scholarship application deadlines at Hult?
That's a great question. So we have a couple throughout the year. These are determined by our financial aid committee. So we don't have one currently, but there should be one. We have rolling admissions throughout the year. So it's always best to apply sooner rather than later when you've decided on the year that you would like to enroll in an MBA program, because very typically schools have a finite pool of funds that they are able to distribute amongst their applicants. So of course you would want to be in that earlier group so that you have a higher chance of receiving scholarship from the school, and then even a higher amount. So our next scholarship deadline is yet to be announced, but do stay posted. We have several throughout the year, and we do, with this upcoming February 5th deadline, still have some scholarship opportunities available.
Yes, thank you very much, Daren. I see questions pop up, so again, we'll continue doing this. Angelina was asking, how do I get the practice questions? Again, there are all kinds of resources. You could try our system for the first 7 days, and you could see the questions. And we can chat again if you'd like to get a full access to the system, to 5,000 questions. Then there'll be an option for you to do so as well. A person was asking, Jonathan, would you recommend skipping the writing portion if you've done well in the past? See the writing portion and see the prior score. That is not really how this works. The business schools do not average out the sections. It's not, sometimes, let's say you do very well in one section, poorly on the other section, and the other way around on the other test. No, it is really one full test that the schools are taking into consideration. So if you've already gotten a 6, then please try to get a 6 again. And of course, 6 is not necessarily a required score. It's a great score to have. It's not actually very hard to get a score of 6. We spent in our course about an hour teaching the AWE, and the majority of our students get above 5. It's not a difficult section at all. You just need to know how to deal with it. Also, when you're doing practice tests, make sure you write the essays as much as you can, because here's what's going to happen if you skip the essays. I had one of my students, actually before she became my student, she wrote the test. And on the actual essay, she said, I believe this essay is a waste of time. Really bad idea. Not only she got a 0, but the business schools see your actual essay. But most importantly, if you don't spend time to write the essay, you're not going to be as tired when you get to the quant and verbal section. It's going to be overinflated. So make sure you take every single section, the essay, the integrated reasoning, the quant, and the verbal when you're doing practice tests. Somebody was saying you have to send all the scores you've ever gotten on the GMAT. So here's how this works. If you don't cancel your scores, the scores stay on your record for 5 years. They expire or they burn out after 5 years. If you, let's say, go and take the test and accept your score, don't cancel it, it stays on the record, and let's say you don't send it to any business schools, then you go and rewrite it again. Now you got a better score, and you decide to send that one to business schools. The business school will also see your prior score. So if you don't want the schools to see your prior scores, there is now an option to cancel your score going back up to 5 years. It costs more money than to cancel it on the day, but there is an option to do so as well.
Great, and I see some admissions related questions regarding the timeline for submitting applications. So first is, if you're interested in applying for the class of 2018, is it too early to apply? Certainly not. Some schools might not have their deadlines posted yet for 2018. Hult in particular, we don't have that showing just yet, as we are still in our admission cycle for 2017. But if you are set on that school or on Hult, then you should apply early. It's great, again, always just to show that you're eager, you're expressing very early interest in the school, and we take notice of that. And how far ahead should you apply for your MBA? If you are still considering 2018 and you haven't applied yet, there's a lot of schools that are approaching either their final deadlines or, similar to Hult, have rolling admissions. So Hult specifically allows candidates to apply for our program all the way up through June of the year that they're planning to enroll. But programs do fill up and those scholarship opportunities taper off. So making sure, if you are looking at having your first choice campus, or if you're hoping for higher scholarship, it's always better to apply early, but it's certainly not too late. We're still approaching our third admissions deadline, so there's plenty of time to be considered for 2017.
Thank you, Daren. And somebody was asking what happens when you sign up to take a free practice test at that link, admitmaster.com/free test. So what's going to happen is you're going to get access to our online platform for 7 days. During these 7 days, you can take one full-length practice test, the entire test, except for the essay. And it is adaptive. It uses the interface that's very similar to the real test. And it also will let you take the first 2 lessons in the online platform, in the online course, and also create custom quizzes, up to 50 questions, where you can go to the test generator and pick and choose the questions that you want to do. So this is what's going to happen. And then if you decide that you like this platform, you want to continue studying, then you can certainly upgrade to the full access. The option where you are essentially taking the classroom classes online is a little bit different. There is a very personalized option. With this platform, you are simply getting access to it, and you navigate, you take lessons on your own. With the classroom option, it's very, very high touch, very individualized program, and each instructor only works with about 12 students a month. And whether you take it in a class or whether you take it online, there's a lot of interaction in person. The videos that you're going to see, the exercises you're going to do, is going to be custom given to you by the instructor. So that's also something that I'm going to mention in the email tomorrow. If you're not in one of our cities where we have classes, Toronto, Montreal, Chicago, then there is an option that as well we can discuss. It also includes some additional help with MBA admissions, where we're going to take a look at your profile and give you some feedback. And of course, it includes lots of touch points and private tutoring as well. Somebody was asking whether Hult starts only in the fall. Daren, I think you should be able to answer.
Yes, and we do only have fall intake. So we are a 1-year accelerated program, whether you're looking at our MBA or other specialized masters, or even the Master of International Business, which is for candidates that want to study a program similar to the MBA but don't have the work experience that is required just yet. For all of these programs, they are 1-year intensive. All intake is in the fall. But again, we're still accepting applications for enrollment this fall.
Okay, thank you so much, Daren. Well, I just want to do a last call for any burning questions. We're going to wrap up here, certainly by 7:30. It's about 7:25. So if there are any last burning questions from anyone, please type them up either in Q&A or in the webinar chat. And if you have any questions later on, we will certainly share our contact information after this webinar. So make sure you check your email tomorrow. There will be our direct contact information from both Daren and I. Any questions you have whatsoever about the GMAT, I'm going to be happy to answer. Any of the questions that you have about the application to MBA programs, I'm sure that Daren will be happy to connect with you. Again, if you are in any of these cities, Daren, are you going to any other cities except Montreal, Chicago, Boston, Toronto in the next few days?
So those are also the cities that we will be present. So you can, if you're interested in meeting with a director of enrollment from Hult, I will be at some of those fairs. And if it's not me, then it will be one of my colleagues. But we love to get to meet people face to face. It would be really amazing too, if any of you are in these cities, to now see your names as participants in our webinar and then get to meet you in person. But this goes for any admission cycle. When you're looking at schools, the chance to go and meet with someone in person is always really great.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Thanks very much, Daren. It's always a great idea to really come out and meet with the schools in person. If anybody's in Boston and hasn't really yet been at the Hult campus, then please make sure you come out. And if you haven't been to any MBA fairs, this is a great way. There's going to be some seminars, workshops as well. Somebody was asking, there's a question for me and a question for Daren. So Daren, if you don't mind, maybe you can answer a quick question and then I'll answer the question about getting study tricks and some books. Where would you find these books? Daren, the question to you was, what's the average time to find employment after the graduation and what's an employment rate? And maybe you can also say, where do people find employment?
Great. So we were actually ranked #1 by The Economist for MBA programs globally for diversity of industry amongst our graduates. So really students are heading off in all different directions. We're a global MBA with several different campuses with about 134 nationalities. So there's no one particular profile coming into the MBA or graduating from the program, which just makes it that much more of an enriching experience for each of our candidates, getting to study alongside people from all over the world with varying professional backgrounds. So in terms of the industries that people are going into, of course, you see your very common consulting, financial services, also lots of people that are in marketing roles, in roles working even in C-level positions upon graduation. But we have a career statistics brochure, which I would be happy to send anyone. So again, email me directly and I can send you a brochure, which we have, which just is a nice, concise way of putting all of this information into one place. As for our employment rate, 88% of our graduates are employed within the first 3 months of graduation. And we have a career advisor who will work with you one-on-one from day one to help you land jobs. Simultaneously, our corporate relations teams are holding events on campus where they bring in corporate partners so that you have face-to-face time with these prospective employers. We even have internship opportunities that we connect you with. So we make sure that you are starting this forward-thinking process, what comes after the degree, from the very onset of the program. And this allows the success rate to be that high.
Yes, thank you, Daren. And I also wanted to add that it's really, really important as you're going through this process to get around people who are going through the same journey. It's very kind of easy to just hide behind your computer and do a lot of questions or hide behind the book. But this is a fairly difficult journey, the journey of MBA admissions and deciding what's right for you. So make sure you talk to people, and we're all friendly. Most of the business schools are very friendly. We work with a lot of schools. What we find is that really people at Hult are probably some of the nicest people of all of the business schools. Of course, everybody is nice, but they're just so friendly, and that's why we have a really good synergy. Of course, we have our students going to a lot of different schools, but a lot of them go to Hult as well because there's really this personal touch, and there's a lot of this in-person connection and networking opportunities that you should be taking advantage on from day one. A lot of people who come take our classes they then connect with each other, and one person might go to one school, another one might go to another school, and it's a really great way to build your network on LinkedIn. Somebody was asking a question, do all campuses in the US have equal employment outcomes? Is there a difference if you choose San Francisco over Boston? Darren, I think that's a question for you.
Great. And actually, I think these more personalized questions, because it's a really interesting process as you navigate which campus you would like to spend the majority of your time on, or at least have the option to rotate to. These more personal conversations I would love to take offline. So if you would like to email me directly, we can set up a time to speak and see what works best for you, because the campus choice is very individualized, and it's a great process for us to walk through together.
Okay, yes, great. Thank you, Daren. Bella is asking, what about the study trick books? Well, there's good and bad news here. The bad news is that unfortunately there's not one book that will have all of the study tricks. That's an end all and be all. But fortunately, though, a lot of books have really good strategies. If I were to suggest probably maybe one or some sets of books, I would recommend really like talking to your friends and asking them what books they've used, because some people respond well to the Barron's. Actually, Barron's, the GMAT, was written by one of our instructors, a really good friend of mine, Bobby Umar. It's a book that contains a really good summary of the questions. You can do a search by Barron's Educational Series. Barron's is a company that publishes books but doesn't actually offer courses. The thing about a lot of the books is you got to understand that if a company publishes books, then a lot of the times this company would publish a book that you can pick up for $20, but that same company offers courses for $1,000 or $1,500 or $2,000. Now, of course, they don't want to give out all the tricks in a book. Otherwise, they'll just be killing their business. So it's an unfortunate thing, but that's how a lot of the books are structured. So what you could do is you could pick up good strategies from different books. Some of the books are kind of more theory-based. Some of the books are a little more strategy-based. I don't really want to single out any specific book here on this webinar, just to be fair. I might say, Kaplan book is good and Princeton book is bad, or the other way around. And then some people are saying, well, I studied with that book, it's actually good, right? So if you want to chat with me privately, I could recommend to you some good resources, some good books you could pick up in a bookstore. I just don't want to be unfair to any specific books or say anything negative about the books, especially on this public forum, right? I could give you some pros and cons about all kinds of books you might be considering. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. But here's the most important thing is that the books are there not to really substitute that process of self-improvement and learning the strategies. You can get some tricks from a lot of different books, even from some very poorly written books. Even from a book you can pick up for $15 or $20 in a bookstore, you can pick up a lot of good strategies. But then you have to go back to doing the questions and understand if you can apply these strategies to these questions and see if these strategies work and see if you can actually apply them. And I always tell, and I honest to God, I cannot play golf, but I always, when somebody is asking me, I say, I know how to play golf. I've watched the game of golf multiple times. I know exactly how to play it, but I can't play it, right? So if you simply read a book, you will be just like me, who knows how to play golf but can't play it. So it's really a process of using the books for the right purpose that would give you a much better benefit. All right, I don't think there are any more questions. So with this,
it looks like that's it, Sergey.
Looks like that's it. Okay, well, thank you so much, guys. Again, I'm more than happy to connect one-on-one and chat about anything you want. You get, I mean, some people after doing the webinars literally just took a screenshot of their calendar and sent me their calendar and said, could you please comment? I'm going to be happy to do that as well. Now we will be also, we're going to talk about this, but I believe we're going to be putting together some webinars that might be a little more deeper dive into some specific strategies. So watch out for an email. It might be in a few days to a few weeks. Then we might be doing some webinars that are a little more deep dive into some specific strategies. And we'll be certainly happy to see you on these webinars.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Sergey, for sharing all of these amazing tips. And thank you, everyone who participated. It was great to see all of your questions. And I see a lot of you are motivated. 700, here I come. So all of the best in these next steps, whether it be tackling the GMAT, whether it be starting that application for the MBA, or continuing both. So we really hope to see you in person someday. If not, continue this chat through email or over the phone. And again, thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you, Sergey. Until next time.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Daren. And again, thanks everyone. And one thing that I want to leave you with is that anybody can get a score of 700 plus. It's a totally beatable test. If you focus on developing the right skills, you can do it. Thank you very much, guys. We love you too. Take care.
Bye.
Have an awesome night.